Chapter 1, The Iron Exile. Part 1, Temporal Displacement. The quantum tunnel collapsed around Tony Stark like the universe itself was folding inward. Red and gold armor sparked and hissed as dimensional barriers tore at the very fabric of reality. The Time Stone's energy, wild and uncontrolled after Thanos' destruction, had created a cascade failure in the quantum realm. Tony's last memory of his home universe was watching the Mad Titan's forces overrun what remained of the Avengers compound, knowing that his desperate gambit with the Time Stone was humanity's final hope. Now, as consciousness slowly returned, Tony found himself face down on wet asphalt, rain pattering against his damaged Mark 52 armor. The HUD flickered weakly, displaying error messages in a dozen different systems. Environmental sensors showed massive electromagnetic anomalies, gravitational inconsistencies that made no sense according to any physics he understood. Friday, he croaked, his voice hoarse. Boss, I'm reading massive systematic failures across all networks. GPS is non-functional, satellite uplinks are dead, and Boss, the star formations don't match any known astronomical data. Tony's blood ran cold. He'd feared this might happen. Temporal displacement was unpredictable at best, catastrophic at worst. But this wasn't just time travel. This was something else entirely. Forcing himself to stand, Tony surveyed his surroundings. Gothic architecture stretched skyward through the rain and fog, gargoyles leering down from buildings that seemed to claw at the dark clouds above. The city had a weight to it, a presence that felt both ancient and modern simultaneously. Street lamps cast pools of amber light that barely penetrated the pervasive gloom. Friday, run a full diagnostic. I need to know how badly we're damaged. On it, boss. Preliminary scans show the arc reactor is stable at 73% capacity. Repulsors are operational but limited. Most concerning is the quantum entanglement chamber, it's completely fried. Without it, the Time Stone's energy is essentially trapped in a feedback loop. Tony's jaw tightened. The quantum entanglement chamber was what had allowed him to attempt time travel in the first place. Without it, he was stranded wherever, or whenever, he'd landed. A sound echoed through the narrow alley where he'd materialized, footsteps, quick and purposeful. Tony's heads-up display immediately tagged the approaching figure, tall, athletic build, moving with practiced stealth. The armor's remaining sensors couldn't penetrate what appeared to be some kind of advanced fabric, but the silhouette was unmistakably human. That's far enough, came a gravelly voice from the shadows. A figure stepped into the dim light, cape billowing dramatically. The costume was primarily black and gray, with a distinctive bat symbol emblazoned across a muscular chest. I don't know what kind of armor that is, but you're going to explain what you're doing in my city. Tony blinked, his analytical mind immediately cataloging details. The voice modulator, the tactical positioning, the obvious training evident in every movement. This wasn't just a costume, this was someone who knew what they were doing. Your city. Tony's faceplate retracted with a soft hiss, revealing a face marked by exhaustion and determination. Let me guess, you're some kind of vigilante. Because I've got to tell you, I've had a really long day that started with trying to save the universe and apparently ended with interdimensional travel. The figure, Batman, Tony's mind supplied, because really, what else could you call someone dressed like that, tilted his head slightly. Interdimensional travel. Long story. Very long story. But first, I need to know where I am. And when I am. This is Earth, right? Please tell me I didn't accidentally quantum tunnel to some alien planet that just happens to have cities and rain. Gotham City, Earth. The year is 2019. Batman's stance remained defensive, ready for action. Now explain the armor and what you meant by saving the universe. Tony felt a mixture of relief and dread wash over him. Earth was good. 2019 was complicated. If this was his universe, he should be dead, snapped out of existence by the Infinity Stones. But the architecture, the atmosphere, even the way this Batman carried himself felt wrong. Familiar but fundamentally different. I'm Tony Stark, he said finally. Also known as Iron Man. And I think I'm in the wrong universe entirely. Part 2, The Dark Knight's Skepticism. Batman's cowled features remained impassive, but Tony's enhanced sensors detected subtle changes in posture and breathing patterns that suggested surprise, quickly masked. After a moment of tense silence, Batman's voice modulator crackled to life again. Tony Stark died 6 months ago. Car accident in Monaco. The words hit Tony like a physical blow. In this universe, there was apparently a version of himself who had lived and died in completely different circumstances. No Iron Man, no Avengers, no desperate battle against cosmic threats. Well, Tony said, managing to keep his voice steady despite the revelation, that explains why my satellite uplinks aren't working. Different universe, different Tony Stark. The question is, how different is everything else? Batman's detective instincts were clearly engaged now. Explain the armor. Explain how you claim to have traveled between universes. And explain why I should believe any of this instead of assuming you're either delusional or running some elaborate con. Tony couldn't help but smile grimly. Paranoid and thorough. I can respect that. Friday, external holographic display, limited power consumption. The air between them shimmered, and a translucent projection appeared showing technical schematics of the Mark 52 armor. Batman's eyes widened almost imperceptibly as the display rotated, revealing the intricate fusion of mechanical engineering and advanced physics that made the suit possible. Arc reactor technology, Tony began, his voice taking on the tone he used when explaining complex concepts to government officials or board members. Clean fusion energy, miniaturized and contained within a magnetic field matrix. The suit itself is a flying weapons platform with integrated AI, advanced sensors, and enough firepower to level a city block. But that's not the impressive part. The holographic display shifted, now showing readings from the quantum entanglement chamber before its failure. This is what's left of my time travel apparatus. Quantum mechanics manipulated through a combination of PIM particles, tesseract energy, and... Tony hesitated, then decided to go all in, the time stone. Batman's reaction was subtle but noticeable, a slight shift in stance, a barely perceptible intake of breath. Time stone. One of 6 infinity stones. Cosmic artifacts that control fundamental aspects of reality. The time stone specifically allows manipulation of temporal flow. I was using it to try to go back and prevent a universal extinction event. Tony's expression darkened. A being called Thanos had collected all 6 stones and used them to eliminate half of all life in the universe. When conventional approaches failed, I attempted to use time travel to prevent his success. And instead you ended up here. Instead I ended up here. Tony deactivated the holographic display, the Mark 52's power reserves already concerning him. Look, I know this sounds insane. If someone came to me with this story, I'd assume they were either on drugs or having a psychotic break. But the evidence is standing right in front of you. This armor represents technology that shouldn't exist on this Earth. My arc reactor is producing clean fusion energy using principles your physics community probably hasn't even theorized yet. Batman was quiet for a long moment, processing. Tony could see the analytical mind working, weighing possibilities and probabilities. Finally, he spoke. Gotham has seen its share of impossible things. Metahumans, alien technology, magic. He paused. If what you're saying is true, then you represent a potentially massive disruption to this world's balance of power. That's not my intention, Tony said quickly. I don't want to conquer or rule or any of that megalomaniac nonsense. I want to find a way back to my own universe. My team, my friends, they're facing universal annihilation without me. Every second I spend here is another second they're fighting a losing battle. And if you can't find a way back. Tony was quiet for a moment, considering the implications. Then I figure out how to build a life here without causing a technological singularity or accidentally destabilizing your world's geopolitical structure. But first, I need to understand what I'm dealing with. This Earth, these metahumans, you mentioned, the level of technology, the major players. He gestured toward Batman's obviously advanced equipment. You're clearly not just some guy in a costume. You have resources, technology, connections. I need information. Batman studied him for another long moment, then came to a decision. There's a place we can talk. More private than an alley in the Narrows. The Narrows. Part of Gotham you don't want to be wandering around in damaged armor after midnight. Batman produced some kind of grappling gun from his utility belt. Can that suit still fly? Tony ran a quick diagnostic. Limited range and power, but yes. Lead the way. Part 3, The Cave. The Batcave was, Tony had to admit, impressive. Hidden beneath Wayne Manor, it was part command center, part laboratory, part garage for the most advanced collection of vehicles he'd seen outside of his own workshop. As they descended through the hidden entrance, Tony's engineering mind cataloged everything he could see. The massive computer array, the forensic analysis stations, the weapon testing ranges, the trophy cases filled with mementos from past cases. "This is a serious operation," he murmured, his voice echoing slightly in the vast space. "How long have you been doing this?" "Long enough." Batman's response was curt as he moved toward the computer array. "Alfred, we have a guest." An elderly man in an impeccable suit emerged from the shadows near what appeared to be a medical bay. His posture was straight, his manner dignified, but Tony noticed the way his eyes immediately assessed both the armor and the man wearing it. This wasn't just a butler, this was someone with training. "Master Bruce, I do hope you haven't brought home another stray with serious injuries and an even more serious attitude problem." "This one's different, Alfred. He claims to be Tony Stark." Alfred's eyebrows rose slightly. "I see. And the armor? Also claims to be from another universe where he's a superhero." Batman was already at the computer, fingers flying over the keyboard. "I'm running analysis on the energy signatures his suit was emitting. Initial readings suggest technology at least 50 years ahead of anything currently available." Tony approached the computer array, his suit's sensors automatically interfacing with the systems where possible. Impressive setup. Custom quantum processors, military-grade encryption, satellite uplinks to what looks like a global network. "You're not just operating in Gotham, are you?" "The Justice League monitors threats worldwide," Batman replied, his tone suggesting he was sharing more information than usual. "Metahuman activities, alien incursions, mystical disturbances. If what you're claiming is true, your arrival definitely qualifies." Justice League. Tony's interest was immediately piqued. Organization of superheroes. How many members, what kind of capabilities, what's the command structure? Batman paused in his typing and looked at Tony with what might have been amusement. "You're already thinking tactically, analyzing us as potential assets or threats." "Habit." Tony shrugged. "I led a team called the Avengers in my universe. When you're responsible for protecting the world, you automatically evaluate every new variable for its strategic implications." He gestured toward the computer displays. "Your setup suggests someone who thinks the same way. Global monitoring, advanced analytics, contingency planning for multiple threat scenarios. The difference is that I plan for everything, including the possibility that supposed allies might become enemies." Batman's words carried a subtle warning. "Smart policy," Tony acknowledged. "I'd do the same in your position. Question is, what do I need to do to prove I'm not a threat? Because I'm going to need help understanding this universe if I'm going to find a way home, or figure out how to exist here without causing problems." Alfred stepped forward with a tray bearing what appeared to be coffee and several small sandwiches. "Perhaps, Master Bruce, our guest might appreciate some refreshment while you conduct your analysis. Interdimensional travel sounds quite taxing." Tony accepted the coffee gratefully, realizing he couldn't remember the last time he'd eaten anything substantial. The sandwich was surprisingly good, definitely not gas station food. "Alfred, was it? You seem remarkably calm about all this." "I've learned to take the extraordinary in stride, Mr. Stark. Master Bruce has a talent for bringing home the impossible." Alfred's tone was dry but not unkind. "Though I must admit, claims of interdimensional travel are somewhat unusual even by our standards." The computer chimed, drawing Batman's attention back to the displays. "Energy signature analysis complete. The power source in your suit is unlike anything in our databases. The quantum mechanics involved shouldn't be possible according to current scientific understanding." "That's because they're not," Tony said, settling into one of the chairs near the computer array. "Arc reactor technology required breakthroughs in 4 different fields of physics, plus some engineering innovations that took me 3 years to perfect. The quantum entanglement chamber was even more complicated. I had to essentially rewrite half of quantum mechanics theory to make it work." "Show me." Tony smiled. This was familiar territory, the joy of sharing complex technical knowledge with someone capable of understanding it. He activated his suit's holographic projectors again, displaying detailed technical specifications for the arc reactor. The key breakthrough was magnetic field manipulation at the subatomic level, he began, his voice taking on the enthusiasm he always felt when discussing his work. Traditional fusion requires massive containment systems because of the temperatures and pressures involved. But if you can manipulate magnetic fields with sufficient precision, you can contain the reaction in a space no larger than a hockey puck. Batman leaned forward, studying the holographic displays with obvious interest. The power output readings are extraordinary. This single reactor produces more energy than most small nuclear plants. Clean energy, too. No radioactive waste, no risk of meltdown, no environmental impact beyond the initial resource extraction for construction. Tony expanded the display to show power distribution systems throughout the suit. The entire Mark 52 runs off this single reactor, including propulsion, weapons, life support, AI processing, and advanced sensors. In my universe, I was planning to revolutionize global energy production with this technology. Was planning. Tony's expression darkened again. Before Thanos. Before the universal extinction event I mentioned. When half of all life disappears, long-term energy policy becomes somewhat less relevant. The cave fell silent except for the quiet hum of computers and life support systems. Alfred quietly refilled Tony's coffee cup, while Batman continued studying the technical specifications with the focused intensity of someone trying to solve an extremely complex puzzle. Finally, Batman spoke. Assuming everything you've told us is true, and the evidence certainly supports it, what exactly do you need from us? Tony took a long sip of coffee, organizing his thoughts. Information, primarily. I need to understand how this universe works, the major players, the threats, the level of technology, the political structure. If there are cosmic-level entities here, beings with power similar to the Infinity Stones, methods of interdimensional or temporal travel that exist in this universe. You're looking for a way home. I'm looking for any possibility of returning to my universe, yes. But I'm also trying to be realistic. The quantum entanglement chamber is completely destroyed. The time stone's energy is trapped in a feedback loop that I don't currently have the resources to safely contain or redirect. It's entirely possible that I'm stuck here permanently. Batman nodded slowly. In which case you'd need to establish an identity, find a way to support yourself, and determine how to use your abilities responsibly in this world. Exactly. And that's where things get complicated. Tony gestured toward his armor. This technology represents a significant advancement over what exists in this universe. In the wrong hands, it could destabilize global power structures, trigger arms races, or enable catastrophic destruction. I need to be very careful about how I proceed. There's something else you should know, Batman said, his voice taking on a more serious tone. Your counterpart in this universe, the Tony Stark who died, he was brilliant, but he never developed anything approaching this level of technology. His company, Stark Industries, exists but focuses primarily on conventional engineering and some basic clean energy research. Nothing that would indicate the theoretical knowledge necessary for arc reactor development. Tony frowned. So I can't just step into his life and continue where he left off. No, and attempting to do so would raise questions I'm not sure you're prepared to answer. Batman's fingers moved across the keyboard again, bringing up news articles and corporate profiles. Stark Industries is currently being managed by a board of directors. The company is profitable but not particularly innovative by this world's standards. What about Pepper Potts? Is she? Tony's voice caught slightly. In his universe, Pepper had been everything to him, friend, lover, business partner, the person who kept him grounded when his ego and his demons threatened to consume him. Virginia Potts was Tony Stark's personal assistant and, according to most accounts, his closest friend. She disappeared 2 weeks after his funeral. Some reports suggest she was offered a position with the new management structure and declined. Others indicate she may have left the country entirely. The news hit Tony harder than he'd expected. In a universe where he'd never become Iron Man, where he'd died young in a car accident, the relationships that had defined his life had developed completely differently. Pepper existed here, but she was a stranger who'd known and cared for a different Tony Stark entirely. Alfred, who had been quietly observing the conversation, stepped forward. Master Bruce, perhaps it would be beneficial to contact the Justice League regarding our guest's situation. This seems rather beyond the scope of typical Gotham City concerns. Batman considered this for a moment. Some of them, perhaps. Wonder Woman has experience with mystical forces that might relate to interdimensional travel. The Flash has dealt with alternate timelines and parallel universes. Superman. He paused. Superman would want to help, but his approach to problems like this tends to be more direct than might be advisable. What kind of capabilities are we talking about? Tony asked. In my universe, enhanced individuals typically fell into a few categories: technology-based like myself, genetically enhanced like Captain America, or cosmic-powered like Thor. What's the power level here? Higher than you might expect, Batman replied grimly. Superman is essentially invulnerable and strong enough to move continental plates. The Flash can run faster than light and manipulate time to a limited degree. Wonder Woman is an Amazon with divine parentage and weapons forged by the gods. Green Lantern wields a power ring capable of creating constructs limited only by imagination and willpower. Tony whistled softly. That's impressive. And concerning, from a strategic standpoint. How do you coordinate team actions with that level of power differential? Very carefully. Batman's tone suggested this was an ongoing challenge. Most of them are fundamentally decent people with strong moral codes. But when you're dealing with individuals who could accidentally level cities, every decision carries enormous weight. I'm beginning to understand why you're so cautious about potential new variables, Tony said. In my universe, I was one of the most powerful members of the Avengers, and I was nowhere near the level you're describing. If something went wrong with one of your team members. Global catastrophe, Batman finished. Which is why we maintain extensive contingency plans and why I'm being very careful about how to proceed with your situation. Tony leaned back in his chair, processing the implications. So I've landed in a universe where the baseline power level is significantly higher than what I'm used to. The political and technological landscape is different enough to make establishing an identity complicated, and the potential consequences of making mistakes are correspondingly more severe. That's an accurate assessment. Well, Tony said with a wry smile, I've always enjoyed a challenge. Part 4, First Contact. 3 days later, Tony found himself in a completely different environment. A massive space station orbiting Earth, its crystalline walls offering a spectacular view of the planet below. The Watchtower, as Batman had called it, served as the Justice League's primary headquarters and meeting facility. Tony's Mark 52 armor, now running at reduced power to conserve energy, felt almost primitive compared to the advanced technology surrounding him. The teleportation system alone represents a breakthrough in matter transmission that would revolutionize global transportation, he murmured to Friday, his AI companion providing a constant stream of technical analysis through his neural link. Boss, I'm reading energy signatures that don't match any known physics. Whatever civilization built this technology was operating on principles we don't fully understand. Batman, now dressed in a more formal version of his costume suitable for official league business, gestured toward a large circular chamber ahead of them. The others are waiting. I should warn you, they're going to have questions. Lots of questions. Understandable, Tony replied. If someone claiming to be from another universe showed up in my world, I'd want to thoroughly vet them before deciding whether they represented an opportunity or a threat. As they entered the chamber, Tony's first impression was of power barely contained. The individuals gathered around the central conference table radiated an almost palpable sense of capability. Superman, instantly recognizable despite never having seen him before, stood with the posture of someone accustomed to bearing enormous responsibility. His costume was simpler than Tony had expected, but the man wearing it had an undeniable presence. Wonder Woman, her armor gleaming and her bearing regal, studied Tony with eyes that seemed to see far more than most. The Flash, vibrating slightly even while standing still, appeared eager and curious. Green Lantern's ring cast a subtle emerald glow, and Tony's sensors detected energy readings that defied conventional understanding. So, Superman said, his voice warm but cautious, Batman tells us you're Tony Stark from another universe. That's correct, Tony replied, retracting his faceplate so they could see his face clearly. I realize it sounds like science fiction, but the evidence supports the claim. My technology, my knowledge of physics principles that apparently don't exist in your universe, the energy signatures from my damaged quantum entanglement system, it all points to the same conclusion. Wonder Woman stepped forward, her presence commanding attention. In my experience, travel between worlds is rarely accidental. The gods who forged the paths between realms did so with specific purposes in mind. What force drove you here? Tony appreciated the directness of the question. Desperation, primarily. My universe was facing an extinction-level threat, a being called Thanos who had acquired artifacts capable of eliminating half of all life with a snap of his fingers. When conventional approaches failed, I attempted to use time travel to prevent the catastrophe. The process went wrong, and instead of traveling through time, I apparently traveled between universes. The Flash, Barry Allen according to Batman's brief, looked intrigued. I've dealt with alternate timelines and parallel dimensions before. The multiverse is complicated, but traveling between different versions of reality usually requires specific conditions or technologies. What were you using for power? An artifact called the Time Stone, channeled through a quantum entanglement chamber of my own design. Tony activated his holographic projectors, displaying technical specifications that made even Superman lean forward with interest. The stone itself was one of 6 cosmic artifacts that controlled fundamental aspects of reality: time, space, power, reality itself, the mind, and the soul. Green Lantern's ring flared slightly. The Guardians of the Universe have legends about artifacts with similar descriptions. Weapons of cosmic significance that predate most civilizations. These Infinity Stones, as they were collectively known, were definitely pre-civilization. According to the records I could access, they were created at the moment of the Big Bang, forged from the fundamental forces that shaped the universe. Tony's expression darkened. Thanos collected all 6 and used them to fulfill his twisted vision of universal balance. Superman's jaw tightened. Half of all life, indiscriminately. Completely random. Rich, poor, powerful, powerless, it didn't matter. Entire families disappeared while others remained intact. Civilizations collapsed overnight. The universe I left behind was in chaos, and my team was desperately trying to find a way to reverse the damage. The chamber fell silent as the Justice League members absorbed the implications. Finally, Wonder Woman spoke. This Thanos, describe his capabilities, his resources, his methods. For the next hour, Tony provided a detailed briefing on everything he knew about the Mad Titan. His childhood on the dying planet Titan, his adoption of genocidal philosophy as a solution to resource scarcity, his methodical conquest of civilizations, his collection of the Infinity Stones, and finally his successful implementation of the universal snap that had eliminated trillions of beings. The worst part, Tony concluded, was that he genuinely believed he was saving the universe. In his mind, eliminating half of all life would reduce resource consumption and prevent universal collapse. He saw himself as making the hard choices that lesser beings were too weak to make. Superman shook his head. I've faced beings with godlike power before, but the scope of this threat. It required everything we had, Tony said quietly. And in the end, it wasn't enough. That's why I was willing to risk experimental time travel. My team, my friends, they're still fighting a war they can't win unless something changes. Batman had been quiet throughout most of the briefing, but now he spoke up. Which brings us to the central question: what do you intend to do now that you're here? Tony had been thinking about this question constantly since his arrival. First priority is determining whether there's any way to return to my own universe. I need to research this world's understanding of interdimensional travel, quantum mechanics, cosmic artifacts, anything that might provide a path back. And if there isn't a way back? The Flash asked. Then I need to find a way to contribute meaningfully to this world without disrupting its natural development or creating new problems. Tony gestured toward his armor. This technology represents a significant advancement. Used responsibly, it could address energy crises, enhance global communication, revolutionize transportation. Used irresponsibly, it could destabilize governments, trigger arms races, or enable devastating conflicts. Green Lantern nodded approvingly. You're thinking like someone who understands the weight of power. I've made enough mistakes to learn that lesson the hard way, Tony admitted. In my universe, I started as a weapons manufacturer who thought he was making the world safer by ensuring the good guys had better firepower than the bad guys. Took me years to understand that good guys and bad guys aren't always easy to identify, and that sometimes the greatest threats come from the unintended consequences of good intentions. Wonder Woman studied him with those penetrating eyes. Yet you became a hero. You fought to protect your world despite the costs. Eventually, yes. But it took losing people I cared about, facing the consequences of my arrogance, and learning that being smart doesn't automatically make you wise. Tony's voice carried the weight of hard-won experience. I'm hoping to avoid repeating those mistakes in this universe. Superman stepped forward, his manner becoming more welcoming. The League could use someone with your experience and capabilities. We're always facing threats that require different kinds of expertise. I appreciate the offer, Tony said, but I need to be careful about making commitments before I fully understand the landscape here. My track record includes some spectacular failures alongside the successes. I'd rather take time to understand your world before jumping into situations where my decisions could affect millions of people. Batman almost smiled, cautious and methodical. I approve. The Flash grinned. Don't worry, we've all made mistakes. The key is learning from them and not repeating them. Speaking of learning, Wonder Woman interjected, there are individuals in this world who might be able to help with your interdimensional travel research. Mystical experts, cosmic entities, beings with experience manipulating the fundamental forces of reality. Tony's interest was immediately piqued. I'd appreciate any introductions you could arrange. Magic isn't my area of expertise. In my universe, I focused primarily on technology and physics, but I'm willing to learn if it might provide answers. Green Lantern's ring projected a holographic display showing various cosmic entities and mystical locations. The Guardians of the Universe might have records relating to interdimensional travel. Dr. Fate deals with mystical forces on a regular basis. The Source Wall contains knowledge about the fundamental nature of reality itself. The Source Wall. A massive barrier at the edge of the known universe, Superman explained. It's said to contain ultimate knowledge about the nature of existence, but approaching it is extremely dangerous. Many who've tried have become part of the wall itself. Tony made mental notes of each possibility. What about more conventional approaches? Are there any scientists or organizations in this universe working on theoretical physics relating to dimensional mechanics, quantum entanglement, or temporal manipulation? Star Labs has some of the most advanced research facilities on the planet, Batman replied. They've dealt with metahuman physiology, alien technology, and some theoretical physics research. Dr. Harrison Wells and his team might be able to provide insights into the scientific aspects of your situation. LexCorp also has extensive research capabilities, Green Lantern added, but Lex Luthor's motivations are questionable. He's brilliant, but his obsession with Superman has led him down some dark paths. Superman's expression tightened slightly. Lex sees every new advancement as a potential weapon. I'd be careful about sharing advanced technology with him. Tony nodded. Noted. What about international resources? Government research programs, university laboratories, independent inventors. Wayne Enterprises has some of the most advanced private research facilities, Batman said with what might have been pride. Bruce Wayne has invested heavily in cutting-edge technology development. Bruce Wayne being your civilian identity? Tony asked with a slight smile. Batman's cowled head turned toward him. What makes you think that? Voice analysis, body language patterns, speech patterns, knowledge base, resources required to maintain this operation, Tony rattled off efficiently. Plus Friday ran facial recognition on the bone structure visible through your cowl and cross-referenced it with public records. Don't worry, I'm not planning to out you. Secret identities are important for people in our line of work. The other League members exchanged glances. Superman cleared his throat. You figured that out pretty quickly. I'm good with patterns and technology. Plus, in my universe, I never bothered with a secret identity, everyone knew Tony Stark was Iron Man. But I understand why others might make different choices. Tony's tone was matter-of-fact rather than judgmental. Wonder Woman laughed, a rich sound that echoed through the chamber. I like him. Direct, intelligent, and respectful of others' choices even when he doesn't share them. The question now, Batman said, steering the conversation back to practical matters, is how to proceed. You need resources for research, a place to work, and time to explore your options. You also need some way to support yourself financially and legally exist in this world. Tony had been thinking about this problem as well. In my universe, I had access to essentially unlimited resources through Stark Industries and my personal wealth. Here, I'm essentially starting from nothing. I have advanced technology but limited power supplies, extensive knowledge but no official credentials, and capabilities that could be valuable but might also be dangerous if misused. The Flash spoke up. What if we helped you establish an identity? The League has connections that could provide documentation, credentials, even initial funding for research. That's generous, Tony said, but I'd prefer to earn my way if possible. I've never been comfortable with charity, even well-intentioned charity. If I'm going to build a life in this universe, I want it to be based on legitimate contributions rather than handouts. Superman nodded approvingly. That's admirable. But practical considerations are important too. You need immediate resources to survive while you work toward longer-term solutions. Green Lantern's ring flared again. There might be a way to address both concerns. The League occasionally deals with situations requiring specialized technological expertise. Contract work. Essentially, you provide technical analysis or engineering solutions. We provide compensation and access to resources you need for your research. Tony considered this proposition. What kind of situations are we talking about? I want to be helpful, but I also want to be careful about getting involved in conflicts I don't fully understand. Alien technology that needs analysis, Wonder Woman suggested. Mystical artifacts that might benefit from scientific examination. Theoretical problems that require advanced physics knowledge. Defensive applications primarily, Batman added. Situations where your expertise could help us better understand threats or develop countermeasures, rather than direct combat involvement. That sounds reasonable, Tony agreed. It would give me a chance to learn more about this universe while contributing something valuable. And the compensation could fund research into interdimensional travel. The Flash grinned. Plus, you'd get to work with some of the most advanced technology and most interesting problems in the universe. From what Batman's told us about your background, that might be appealing in itself. Tony couldn't help but return the grin. You're not wrong. I've always been driven by interesting challenges and the opportunity to push the boundaries of what's possible. Superman stood, extending his hand toward Tony. Welcome to Earth, Tony Stark. We're glad you're here, even under these circumstances. Tony shook the offered hand, noting the careful control Superman exercised to avoid inadvertently crushing human bones. Thank you. I'm hoping I can find a way back to my own universe, but if I can't, I'm grateful to have landed somewhere with people who seem committed to protecting others. One more thing, Wonder Woman said as the meeting began to break up. You mentioned that your counterpart in this universe never developed arc reactor technology or advanced armor systems. But you have the knowledge to recreate those innovations. Have you considered what impact that might have on this world's technological development? Tony paused, considering the question. Constantly. Advanced technology can solve problems, but it can also create new ones. Clean fusion energy could revolutionize global energy production and help address climate change, but it could also destabilize existing power structures and create new forms of inequality. Advanced armor systems could protect innocent people, but they could also enable oppressive regimes or trigger arms races. So how do you decide what to develop and what to keep to yourself? Batman asked. Very carefully, Tony replied. With extensive consultation, thorough analysis of potential consequences, and a commitment to prioritizing human welfare over technological advancement for its own sake. In my universe, I learned the hard way that being able to build something doesn't automatically mean you should. Part 5, First Impressions. 2 weeks after his introduction to the Justice League, Tony found himself in a completely different kind of challenge, navigating the social complexities of establishing an identity in a world where he was simultaneously familiar and foreign. Bruce Wayne had been surprisingly helpful in this regard, using Wayne Enterprises' resources to create a plausible background for Anthony Edward Stark, a distant cousin of the deceased Tony Stark, raised in Europe, recently returned to the United States with advanced degrees in theoretical physics and engineering. The documentation is impeccable, Tony admitted, reviewing the files Bruce's people had prepared. They were meeting in Wayne Manor's library, a room that managed to be both opulent and comfortable. Alfred had provided coffee and what he called light refreshments, a spread that would have constituted a full meal anywhere else. Alfred has a talent for creating believable histories, Bruce said with a slight smile. We've had to establish cover identities before. The challenge now is making the identity sustainable, Tony mused, studying the financial records showing a modest inheritance and some patent royalties from European engineering projects. I need to generate income, establish credibility in the scientific community, and build a reputation that will open doors without raising too many questions. Bruce leaned back in his leather chair, his manner more relaxed than Tony had seen in their previous meetings. Have you given thought to what kind of public profile you want to maintain? Your counterpart in this universe was known for being brilliant but also somewhat reckless. Fast cars, expensive parties, a reputation for genius-level intellect paired with questionable decision-making. Tony winced. Sounds familiar, actually. I went through a phase like that in my 20s and early 30s. Before I learned that actions have consequences and that being smart doesn't make you immune to stupidity. He paused, considering. I think I'd prefer to avoid that particular pattern in this universe. I've already lived through the lessons that teach you why that lifestyle is ultimately unsatisfying. A more mature approach might actually work in your favor, Bruce observed. The scientific community tends to respect researchers who are serious about their work. And if you're planning to interact with the League regularly, a reputation for reliability and good judgment would be valuable. Alfred entered the library carrying a silver tray with fresh coffee and what appeared to be a tablet computer. Master Bruce, I took the liberty of researching speaking engagements and conference opportunities that might suit Mr. Stark's background. Several upcoming events could provide platforms for establishing his reputation in the scientific community. Tony accepted the tablet gratefully, scrolling through the list Alfred had compiled. International Conference on Advanced Materials Science. Symposium on Clean Energy Technologies. Workshop on Theoretical Physics Applications. He looked up with genuine appreciation. This is excellent work, Alfred. Any of these would provide opportunities to share knowledge without revealing anything too advanced or dangerous. I also took the liberty of researching suitable residential options, Alfred continued. Master Bruce mentioned that you would prefer to maintain independence while having access to advanced laboratory facilities. About that, Bruce interjected. Wayne Enterprises has a research facility in Gotham that's currently underutilized. State-of-the-art equipment, advanced security, isolated enough to provide privacy for sensitive work. If you're interested, we could arrange a long-term lease arrangement. Tony's eyes lit up with genuine enthusiasm. A real laboratory, with advanced manufacturing capabilities. Everything from precision machining to clean room environments for semiconductor work. The previous occupant was developing advanced materials for aerospace applications before the project was cancelled due to budget constraints. This is incredibly generous, Tony said, though his tone suggested he was already mentally designing improvements to whatever facilities Bruce was describing. What's the catch? Bruce smiled. No catch. Well, almost no catch. Wayne Enterprises would appreciate having a respected scientist associated with the facility. It enhances our reputation in the research community. And if any of your work results in patentable innovations that could be commercialized responsibly, Wayne Enterprises would welcome partnership opportunities. Tony nodded slowly. That's more than fair, and it addresses several problems simultaneously. I get access to the resources I need for research, Wayne Enterprises gets enhanced scientific credibility, and any technological developments can be managed through established corporate structures rather than just appearing out of nowhere. Precisely. Bruce stood, moving toward a wall of bookshelves. There's something else you should know. I've been monitoring global intelligence networks since our first meeting, looking for any unusual activities that might relate to your arrival or similar phenomena. Tony's attention sharpened. Find anything interesting? Bruce pulled a thick folder from behind several books. Several things, actually. Reports of unusual energy signatures detected by various satellite networks around the time of your arrival. Similar signatures detected in 3 other locations worldwide: Metropolis, Central City, and Jump City. Other arrivals. Tony's voice carried a mixture of hope and concern. People from my universe. Unknown. The energy signatures are similar but not identical. Could be other interdimensional travelers, could be unrelated phenomena, could be aftereffects from whatever process brought you here. Bruce opened the folder, revealing satellite imagery and energy analysis charts. What's particularly interesting is the timing. All 4 events occurred within a 6-hour window. Tony studied the data, his analytical mind immediately beginning to process patterns and implications. The quantum cascade failure that brought me here might have created multiple dimensional rifts. If that's the case, others might have been pulled through as well. Others from your universe. Possibly. Or from other universes entirely. Quantum mechanics at this scale can be unpredictable. The failure of my time travel attempt might have created a temporary weakness in the barriers between realities, allowing multiple crossover events. Bruce's expression became more serious. Which means there could be other displaced individuals out there with advanced technology, unknown motivations, and no understanding of our world's power structures. Exactly. Tony closed the folder, his mind racing through possibilities. We need to investigate these other energy signatures. If there are other arrivals, they might be allies, or they might be threats. Either way, they're variables that could significantly impact this world's stability. Alfred cleared his throat softly. Perhaps, gentlemen, this would be an appropriate time to involve the Justice League in a more formal capacity. If there are multiple interdimensional arrivals, the scope of the situation has expanded beyond what can be managed privately. Tony and Bruce exchanged glances. He's right, Tony admitted. This is bigger than just my personal situation. If there are others like me, especially if any of them come from universes where they were villains rather than heroes, the Justice League needs to know immediately. Bruce was already moving toward what Tony assumed was a concealed communication system. I'll contact the League and arrange an emergency meeting. Can you prepare a technical analysis of what these energy signatures might indicate? Already working on it, Tony replied, his fingers moving across the tablet's screen as he began correlating the satellite data with his knowledge of quantum mechanics and interdimensional physics. Friday, are you getting this data? Yes, boss. Initial analysis suggests the energy signatures share common quantum resonance patterns with the dimensional rift that brought us here. High probability that these represent similar interdimensional displacement events. Bruce paused in his preparations. Your AI can analyze this data. Friday's processing capabilities are significantly advanced compared to this world's computer systems. She can identify patterns and correlations that might not be apparent through conventional analysis. Tony looked up from the tablet. With your permission, I'd like to interface her systems with your computer network. She could help analyze these signatures more thoroughly and might be able to predict where future rifts could occur. Is that safe? No offense intended, but an AI from another universe accessing our networks. Tony appreciated the caution. Friday, security protocols. Limited access only, no data retention beyond current analysis requirements, full transparency on all activities. Understood, boss. I'll maintain strict isolation protocols and provide complete activity logs for review. Bruce considered for a moment, then nodded. Alfred, please prepare the secure connection protocols. If we're dealing with multiple dimensional rifts, we need every advantage we can get. As Alfred moved to implement the technical preparations, Tony found himself reflecting on how quickly his situation had evolved. 2 weeks ago, he'd been a displaced refugee from another universe, desperate and alone. Now he was part of a team investigating what could be a multiversal crisis, with access to resources and allies he could never have imagined. Bruce, he said quietly, I want you to know how much I appreciate everything you've done. The identity documents, the laboratory access, the partnership with Wayne Enterprises, you didn't have to help me this extensively. Bruce's response was characteristically direct. In my experience, people with your capabilities and moral compass are rare. Investing in your success is investing in this world's security and well-being. Still, thank you. In my universe, I had resources and connections that made almost anything possible. Starting from nothing in a foreign world. It could have been much more difficult. Alfred returned with a tablet showing network connection protocols. The secure connection is established, Mr. Stark. Your AI should now have limited access to our analysis systems. Friday, run the quantum resonance analysis and cross-reference with any similar patterns in Wayne Enterprises' historical data. Processing, boss. Initial results show that similar but weaker signatures have been detected sporadically over the past 5 years. Always brief, always isolated, but following similar quantum patterns. Tony and Bruce looked at each other with growing concern. 5 years of intermittent dimensional instability, Tony murmured. My arrival might not have been the beginning of this phenomenon, it might have been an escalation of something that's been building for years. Which means, Bruce said grimly, that whatever caused the original instability might still be active. And getting stronger. The implications were staggering. If dimensional barriers were weakening progressively, if Tony's universe hopping had been part of a larger pattern of multiversal instability, then the crisis they were facing could be far more significant than a few random displaced individuals. We need to get to the watchtower immediately, Tony said, standing and beginning to pace. If the dimensional barriers are compromising systematically, we're looking at a multiversal catastrophe that could affect countless realities. Bruce was already activating his communication systems. Justice League, priority alert. Emergency meeting required. We have new information suggesting the scope of our current situation is significantly larger than initially assessed. Superman's voice came through clearly. How much larger? Tony stepped forward. Potentially multiversal in scope. We're not just dealing with a few random dimensional travelers. We might be looking at progressive deterioration of the barriers between realities. Wonder Woman's voice joined the channel. How long do we have? Friday's analysis appeared on the tablet screen, showing projection models that made Tony's blood run cold. If the progression continues at the current rate, he said slowly, complete dimensional barrier collapse within 18 months. Maybe less. The communication channel was silent for several long moments. Finally, Superman spoke. We'll be ready for emergency teleportation in 10 minutes. Bring everything you have. ## Part 6, The Other Arrivals. The emergency session in the Watchtower was unlike any meeting Tony had yet experienced with the Justice League. The usual formal courtesy was replaced by urgent efficiency as members appeared via teleportation from around the globe. Superman arrived from Metropolis, Wonder Woman from Themyscira, Green Lantern from Oa, and the Flash from Central City, each bringing their own data and concerns about unusual phenomena in their respective areas. The energy signature we detected in Central City occurred approximately 4 hours after Tony's arrival, the Flash reported, his words coming slightly faster than normal, a sign of stress that Tony was learning to recognize. Star Labs detected massive quantum disturbances, but by the time we arrived at the coordinates, there was nothing visible. Just residual energy and some unusual electromagnetic readings. Wonder Woman's report was more troubling. The Metropolis event happened 6 hours after the initial displacement. I arrived to find a crater approximately 50 meters in diameter and evidence of significant impact damage. Whatever arrived there had mass and velocity. The energy signature dissipated quickly, but local witnesses reported seeing a figure in some kind of armor disappearing into the urban landscape. Green Lantern's ring projected holographic displays showing his analysis of the Jump City event. This one's different. The energy signature was similar, but the quantum resonance patterns suggest the arrival was controlled, less chaotic than the others. Someone or something with understanding of interdimensional travel might have used the dimensional instability as a pathway. Tony studied all the data, his concern growing with each report. 3 additional arrivals, each with different characteristics. The Central City event sounds like it might have been an accidental displacement similar to mine. The Metropolis arrival involved someone or something with significant mass and kinetic energy, possibly a large object or a being with enhanced physical capabilities. The Jump City arrival. He paused, running calculations through Friday's systems. Someone who understood what was happening and was able to navigate the dimensional rift intentionally. Batman brought up a global map showing all 4 arrival points. The geographic distribution appears random, but the timing suggests a cascading effect. Your arrival might have triggered the others. Or, Tony said grimly, were all symptoms of a larger problem. Friday, analysis of the quantum cascade patterns. His AI's voice filled the chamber through the watchtower's communication systems. Analysis suggests the dimensional rifts were created by a massive disruption in the quantum substrate underlying multiversal reality. The disruption appears to have originated from outside normal spacetime, suggesting involvement of entities or forces operating on cosmic scales. Superman leaned forward. Cosmic scale entities. In my experience, that usually means gods, cosmic abstracts, or beings from dimensions beyond our normal understanding. Wonder Woman nodded thoughtfully. The gods of various pantheons have occasionally manipulated dimensional boundaries. But this level of instability would require power beyond most divine entities. What about the beings you've encountered before? Tony asked. Darkseid, for instance. Batman briefed me on some of the cosmic-level threats you've faced. Darkseid has the power to affect dimensional stability, Green Lantern confirmed, but this doesn't match his usual methods. He's more direct, more focused on conquest than on creating multiversal chaos. The Flash had been studying the timeline data. There's something else. The quantum resonance patterns aren't random, they're following a mathematical progression. Each event has been slightly stronger than the last, and if the pattern continues, the next event will be significantly more powerful, Tony finished. Friday, projection analysis for the next dimensional rift. The holographic display that appeared made everyone in the chamber fall silent. The projected energy levels were orders of magnitude larger than anything they'd seen so far. When? Batman asked quietly. If the progression holds, approximately 72 hours, Friday replied. Superman stood, his expression grim. We need to identify and locate the other arrivals before the next event. If they're from universes with hostile intentions, or if they're being manipulated by whatever force is causing this instability. Agreed, Wonder Woman said. But we also need to understand what's causing the progressive escalation. Are we dealing with natural multiversal instability, or is something actively working to weaken dimensional barriers? Tony had been thinking about this question since reviewing the data. In my universe, the only entities with power to affect multiversal stability were cosmic abstracts, beings like eternity, death, the living tribunal. But their interventions were usually to maintain stability, not disrupt it. Green Lantern's ring flared. The Guardians of the Universe might have records of similar phenomena. I could return to Oa and research their archives. Do it, Batman said immediately. But stay in communication. If the next dimensional rift is as powerful as projected, we might need all available resources. The Flash vibrated with nervous energy. I'll investigate the Central City arrival site more thoroughly. Maybe there's evidence we missed that could tell us who or what came through. I'll coordinate with Star Labs, Superman added. Dr. Wells and his team have experience with dimensional phenomena. They might be able to provide insights into the technical aspects of what we're seeing. Wonder Woman turned to Tony. Your knowledge of advanced physics and interdimensional travel makes you our best resource for understanding the technical aspects of this crisis. What do you need to develop countermeasures? Tony considered the question carefully. Access to the most advanced physics laboratories available, coordination with this world's top theoretical physicists, and detailed analysis of the quantum signatures from each arrival site. If we're going to prevent dimensional barrier collapse, we need to understand exactly what force is causing the progressive destabilization. The Wayne Enterprises facility I mentioned, Bruce said. It has the equipment you'd need, and it's secure enough to handle sensitive research. Good. But I'll also need to physically examine the arrival sites. There might be residual quantum effects that could provide clues about the source of the instability. Tony paused, then made a decision that he knew was risky but necessary. And I think we need to actively search for the other arrivals. They're not just potential threats or allies, they're sources of information about what's happening across the multiverse. Batman nodded approvingly. Coordinated investigation. Superman and Wonder Woman can handle the Metropolis arrival. If it was something with significant mass and kinetic energy, they're best equipped to deal with potential dangers. Flash can investigate Central City with Star Labs support. I'll coordinate intelligence gathering and maintain oversight of the overall operation. What about Jump City? Tony asked. I'll handle that personally, Green Lantern said. My ring can analyze the quantum resonance patterns more directly than conventional technology. If someone came through that rift intentionally, the energy signature might tell us something about their capabilities and motivations. Tony stood, feeling the familiar rush of adrenaline that came with facing a complex, high-stakes problem. To work. We have 72 hours to understand a multiversal crisis and prevent what could be catastrophic dimensional collapse. As the meeting broke up and League members began teleporting to their respective assignments, Wonder Woman approached Tony privately. There's something I want to discuss with you, she said, her manner serious but not unfriendly. Your arrival here might not be as random as you think. Tony's attention sharpened immediately. What do you mean? In my experience with divine and cosmic forces, significant events rarely happen without purpose. Your displacement from your universe at this specific time, to this specific world, just as dimensional stability is becoming critical. She paused meaningfully. The gods work in ways that are not always immediately apparent, but they rarely waste opportunities or coincidences. You think something or someone arranged for me to be here? I think, Wonder Woman said carefully, that your arrival might be part of a larger design. Your knowledge of advanced physics, your experience with cosmic threats, your moral character, these could be exactly what this world needs to address the current crisis. Tony considered this possibility with mixed feelings. I've never been comfortable with the idea of destiny or predetermined roles. I prefer to think that people make choices and face the consequences, rather than being puppets in some cosmic game. Wonder Woman smiled. That attitude itself might be exactly what makes you suitable for whatever role you're meant to play. The gods rarely choose individuals who would simply accept instruction without question. Great, Tony said with dry humor. Cosmic responsibility and divine expectations. Because interdimensional exile wasn't complicated enough already. If it helps, Wonder Woman said, I've found that when facing situations involving divine or cosmic forces, the key is to focus on doing what you believe is right rather than trying to understand the larger design. The rest usually works itself out. Tony nodded slowly. That's actually good advice. Focus on the immediate problem, understanding and preventing multiversal collapse, and worry about the cosmic implications later. Exactly. Wonder Woman moved toward the teleportation platform. And Tony, whatever brought you here, I'm glad you're on our side. As she teleported away, Tony found himself alone in the Watchtower's central chamber, looking out at the Earth below. In his universe, he'd fought to protect a world that he'd grown up on, with people he'd known his entire life, using resources and knowledge that he'd spent decades accumulating. Here, he was fighting to protect a world he barely understood, with people he'd known for weeks, using knowledge that might or might not apply to this reality's physics. But as he watched the slow rotation of the planet beneath the space station, Tony realized that the fundamental motivation was the same. Innocent people were in danger, and he had the capability to help. Everything else, the cosmic implications, the divine purposes, the multiversal consequences, was secondary to that basic responsibility. Friday, he said quietly, prepare full analysis protocols. We're going to solve this problem. Understood, boss. Where would you like to start? Tony smiled grimly, feeling more like himself than he had since arriving in this universe. With the data. Always with the data. Let's figure out what's breaking the multiverse and how to fix it. Part 7, The Metropolis Investigation. 48 hours later, Tony found himself standing in a crater in downtown Metropolis, his sensors scanning for any trace of quantum residue while Superman and Wonder Woman coordinated with local authorities to maintain a secure perimeter. The destruction was impressive. Whatever had arrived here had hit the ground with the force of a small meteorite, leaving a perfectly circular depression in what had been a small urban park. No biological traces, he reported, studying the readings on his heads-up display. But the quantum signature is unusual. Friday, are you getting this data? Yes, boss. The quantum resonance pattern suggests the arrival involved massive kinetic energy, but the dispersion pattern indicates controlled deceleration. Whatever came through this rift understood enough physics to avoid a catastrophic impact. Superman landed beside him, his red cape settling around him as he studied the crater. The impact happened at 3:17 a.m. local time. No casualties, but several buildings suffered structural damage from the shockwave. Witnesses reported seeing a figure in some kind of armor disappearing into the city infrastructure immediately after the impact. Armor. Tony's interest sharpened. What kind of armor? Wonder Woman approached with a tablet showing witness statements and security footage. Descriptions vary, but multiple sources describe something metallic, humanoid, and highly advanced. The security footage is mostly obscured by debris and energy discharge, but there are a few frames that show interesting details. Tony studied the low-quality images on the tablet. The figure was indeed humanoid and armored, but the design aesthetic was unlike anything he recognized from his own universe. Where his Iron Man suits were sleek and aerodynamic, this armor appeared bulkier, more angular, with design elements that suggested different technological priorities. The power source is interesting, he murmured, enhancing one of the images using his suit's processing capabilities. Those energy readings don't match arc reactor signatures or anything else I'm familiar with. Friday, analysis of the visible technology. The armor appears to incorporate energy projection systems, but the power distribution suggests a different technological approach than our arc reactor designs. Possibly magic-based enhancement or alternative physics principles. Superman exchanged glances with Wonder Woman. Magic-based technology. It's possible, Tony said, still studying the images. In my universe, we had individuals who combined advanced technology with mystical enhancement. Thor's equipment, for instance, was both scientifically advanced and magically enhanced. If this arrival came from a universe where magic and technology are more integrated. Wonder Woman nodded thoughtfully. That could explain some of the unusual quantum patterns we detected. Magic operates according to different principles than pure physics, but it can interact with technological systems in unpredictable ways. The question is whether this individual is a potential ally or a threat, Superman said. Someone with advanced armor and unknown capabilities loose in Metropolis. Tony was studying the dispersion patterns around the crater with growing interest. Actually, I think we might have an advantage here. Friday, track the quantum signature trail. His AI immediately began processing environmental data from throughout the crater area. Boss, I'm detecting a faint but consistent quantum trail leading northeast from the impact site. The signature is degrading rapidly, but it should be trackable for at least another few hours. Superman looked pleased. We can follow the trail. We can try, Tony confirmed. But I want to be careful about how we approach this. If this individual has advanced armor and unknown capabilities, surprising them could trigger a defensive response that endangers civilians. Wonder Woman was already formulating a plan. Superman can provide aerial oversight and civilian protection. I'll approach from ground level to provide a visible but non-threatening presence. Tony, your armor gives you the best chance of communicating with someone who might be technologically oriented. Sounds reasonable, Tony agreed. But let's establish clear protocols. If this individual shows any signs of hostility or aggression, civilian safety becomes the absolute priority. We can sort out interdimensional politics after we ensure no one gets hurt. They spent the next several minutes coordinating communication frequencies, establishing fallback positions, and reviewing contingency plans. Tony was impressed by the thoroughness and professionalism both heroes brought to the planning process. In his universe, the Avengers had often struggled with coordination during complex operations, but Superman and Wonder Woman worked together with the kind of seamless efficiency that came from years of partnership. The quantum trail led them through downtown Metropolis, a gleaming city that managed to feel both modern and timeless. Tony found himself comparing it favorably to New York, cleaner, more optimized, with architecture that suggested careful urban planning rather than organic growth. The people seemed more relaxed too, less rushed and stressed than what he was used to. Different atmosphere than Gotham, he commented through the communication link. Superman's influence, Wonder Woman replied. His presence changes how people think about their city and their lives. Hope instead of fear, optimism instead of cynicism. Must be nice, Tony said, thinking about his own complicated relationship with public opinion in his universe. In my world, I was usually seen as either a hero or a potential threat, depending on current events and media coverage. The idea of being someone who inspires hope rather than concern. Superman's voice came through the link. It's not always easy. People have high expectations when they see you as a symbol of hope. Sometimes the pressure to live up to that image can be overwhelming. Tony considered this as they continued following the quantum trail. In his universe, he'd often chafed against expectations and public scrutiny, preferring to focus on solving problems rather than managing his public image. But the idea of being someone who genuinely inspired people to be better versions of themselves was appealing. The trail led them to what appeared to be an abandoned industrial facility in the older part of the city. The quantum signature was stronger here, suggesting their target had remained in the area for an extended period. Friday, detailed scan of the facility. Multiple heat signatures detected, boss. One concentrated in what appears to be a workshop area on the second floor. Energy readings suggest active technology, possibly the armor we've been tracking. Superman hovered above the building, his enhanced vision scanning the structure. I can see someone in the workshop area. Humanoid, working on what looks like equipment or machinery. The armor is inactive but nearby. Wonder Woman took position at the main entrance to the facility. No signs of defensive preparations or weapons targeting. Whoever this is, they don't seem to be expecting trouble. Tony felt a mixture of anticipation and caution as they prepared to make contact. This would be his first encounter with another interdimensional arrival, someone who might have answers about the multiversal instability or insights into how to return home. But it could also be someone with hostile intentions or dangerous capabilities. Let's try direct communication first, he decided. Friday, external audio projection. Hello in there, Tony called out, his voice amplified to carry through the building. My name is Tony Stark. I'm here with Superman and Wonder Woman. We'd like to talk with you about your recent arrival in this universe. There was a long moment of silence. Then a voice replied, filtered through what sounded like a sophisticated audio system. Tony Stark. The Tony Stark died months ago. Different Tony Stark, Tony replied. Also interdimensional arrival, also trying to understand what's happening with multiversal stability. We think there might be others like us, and we're trying to make contact. Another pause, then the sound of machinery powering down. You said Superman and Wonder Woman are with you. That's correct, Wonder Woman called out. We're here peacefully. We just want to understand the situation and determine if you need assistance. The main entrance to the facility opened, revealing a figure in advanced armor that was indeed bulkier and more angular than Tony's designs. The helmet retracted, revealing a face that was clearly human but bore the marks of someone who had seen considerable conflict, scars, weathered features, eyes that held the weight of difficult experiences. Victor Von Doom, the figure said, his voice carrying a slight accent and an undercurrent of arrogance that immediately put Tony on alert. And if you are indeed alternate versions of heroes from another universe, then we have much to discuss. Tony's blood ran cold as he recognized the name. In his universe, Dr. Doom had been one of the most dangerous villains the world had ever faced, brilliant, ruthless, and absolutely convinced of his own superiority. The fact that this world's dimensional crisis had brought a version of Victor Von Doom through the barriers was potentially catastrophic. But as he looked at this armored figure, Tony noticed subtle differences from the Doom he'd known. The armor's design incorporated technological elements that seemed less focused on domination and more oriented toward exploration and analysis. The bearing was arrogant, certainly, but not radiating the barely contained malevolence he associated with his universe's version of the character. Dr. Doom, he said carefully, his suit's weapons systems automatically running diagnostic checks while maintaining a non-threatening posture. That's an interesting development. In my universe, Victor Von Doom was one of our most dangerous enemies. The armored figure tilted his head slightly. And in my universe, Tony Stark was a weapons manufacturer whose technology enabled global conflicts and civilian casualties. Perhaps we should focus on present circumstances rather than past reputations. Superman landed nearby, his manner cautious but not overtly hostile. If you're willing to discuss the situation peacefully, we'd appreciate any information you can share about the dimensional instability we're all experiencing. Doom studied the three heroes for a moment, then gestured toward the workshop area. Very well. But understand that Doom cooperates by choice, not from weakness. My armor contains technologies that would be Unpleasant for anyone who mistakes diplomacy for vulnerability. As they entered the facility, Tony's sensors immediately began cataloging the equipment Doom had assembled. Advanced manufacturing tools, quantum analysis devices, energy manipulation systems, all bearing design aesthetics that mixed technological sophistication with what appeared to be mystical enhancement. Impressive setup, Tony admitted grudgingly. How long did it take you to acquire all this equipment? Doom does not acquire equipment. Doom creates what Doom requires. The armored figure gestured toward a workbench covered with partially assembled devices. The technological base of this universe is adequate. With proper enhancement, it serves Doom's purposes. Wonder Woman studied the mystical elements integrated throughout Doom's technology. You're combining magic and science. That's not common in most universes. In Doom's universe, the distinction between magic and science is artificial. Both are tools for understanding and manipulating reality. The limitation exists only in minds too narrow to comprehend their unity. Tony found himself reluctantly intrigued by the technical aspects of what Doom had created. The quantum resonance analyzers are particularly sophisticated. You're trying to map the dimensional instabilities. Doom is determining the source of the multiversal disruption that brought us all here, Doom replied, activating a holographic display that showed dimensional analysis data. The patterns suggest external manipulation rather than natural instability. The display was remarkably similar to Friday's analysis, but with additional layers of data that incorporated mystical energy patterns alongside quantum mechanics. Tony studied the information with growing interest and concern. External manipulation by what? Superman asked. Doom's helmet turned toward the Man of Steel with what might have been approval. That, Kryptonian, is the essential question. The force causing these dimensional rifts operates on scales that transcend individual universes. We are dealing with entities or intelligences that view the multiverse itself as their domain. Tony felt a chill of recognition. In my universe, there were beings called cosmic abstracts, entities that embodied fundamental forces of reality. Death, eternity, the living tribunal. They operated on multiversal scales and could manipulate dimensional barriers. Doom is familiar with such entities, came the response. But this disruption pattern suggests something more specific. Not random multiversal manipulation, but targeted dimensional destabilization with a clear progression toward total barrier collapse. Wonder Woman leaned forward, studying the data more closely. You're saying someone or something is deliberately trying to destroy the barriers between all realities. The evidence supports no other conclusion, Doom declared. And if Doom's calculations are correct, the next dimensional rift will be of sufficient magnitude to create permanent instability. After that, containing the cascade failure becomes impossible. Tony's mind raced through the implications. How long? Less than 24 hours. The workshop fell silent as all three heroes absorbed this information. The timeline they'd been working with had just compressed dramatically, and the stakes had risen from potential crisis to guaranteed catastrophe. Then we need to work together, Tony said, meeting Doom's gaze directly. Whatever our universes, histories, right now we're facing something that threatens all realities. Can you put aside past conflicts for the sake of multiversal survival? Doom considered the question for a long moment. Doom's primary concern is protecting reality itself. If cooperation serves that goal, then Doom will cooperate. But understand that Doom leads any endeavor Doom joins. Doom's intellect and capabilities surpass those of heroes who rely on power rather than superior planning. Superman exchanged glances with Wonder Woman and Tony. We can work with that, as long as protecting innocent people remains the priority. Innocent people exist across all realities, Doom replied. Their destruction serves no one's interests. Doom agrees to prioritize civilian protection while addressing the multiversal crisis. Tony felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. Working with any version of Dr. Doom was risky, but this Doom seemed genuinely concerned with preventing universal destruction rather than pursuing personal power. And his combination of technological sophistication and mystical knowledge might be exactly what they needed to understand and counter the threat they were facing. Then let's get to work, Tony said. We have less than a day to save the multiverse.